What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another live stream, episode 122. Yes, that is correct. 122 consecutive weeks without skipping a beat of the Camera Junkie live stream. If it is your first time, welcome. My name's Lewis, also known as Mr. Camera Junkie, and please introduce yourself in the chat so that you can get the nice, warm welcome from the Camera Junkie crew. And with that being said, let's see exactly who's hanging out here. And we have an amazing comment here saying, woohoo! I actually caught you live. Hi, Lewis and fellow Camera Junkies. How are you doing, Sly? Sly's been doing her own live streams every Friday night, and I've been doing my best to catch her while she does that the same way. You've been doing amazing, super proud of you, and it just gets easier and easier to just have that conversation. As you can see, 122 weeks and I'm still here. Another thing is, like, if Peter is watching, like yesterday I was super late to his live stream because Aiden fell asleep and I happened to just fall asleep by his side the same way, so I missed the 10 o'clock thing, and as soon as I woke up I jumped onto Peter's live stream, but I know he understands. But I'm glad to see him just the same. And right here we have Sammy Superstar in the house saying what's up, saying hi Lewis, how are you doing, Sammy? I also saw your video on the ZV-E1, I believe the day that it came out, so big ups to you to being able to create some content the day of. That was really cool to see that. Kevin is also here saying hello to everyone. What's up, bro? And Paul Duncan, Mr. Moderator's in the house saying what's up to the fam. Rich saying congrats on 122. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And thank you for hanging out. It's nice to see you here hanging out with the Camera Junkie crew. And with that being said, we're going to get right into it. For those of you who it is your first time, I also do a section where I record a podcast over the topic at hand. So if you do have any questions about today's topic or any questions at all, I will be addressing those after that section, but just be sure to put a Q colon in front of it. That way I'll be able to make sure that I go through my list and make sure that your question is addressed before the stream is over. We have Marine X saying door kicked in. How you doing, bro? Thanks for taking the time and hanging out here with us. All right. And I got some notes over here. I'm going to be getting into that section. I'm going to do a countdown. Then I'm going to get into my soliloquy, go over some points. We'll be closing it off with Cities Gone. And then I'll be right back to the chat answering any questions that you might have. Randy's also here hanging out saying hello to everyone. How you doing, Randy? And yep, Paul is also confirming that Q colons do help me find your question, so please use a Q colon for any questions you might have. All right, and with that being said, we're gonna get into it. Gonna get things rolling here. All right. Oh yeah, and definitely I'm really excited now, kind of that it's sort of like a little bit of my procrastination paying off. The fact that YouTube is now rolling out the podcasting feature and how easy it is. It totally answered a lot of my questions as far as, like, was I gonna make a separate channel for the podcast, like content, so on and so forth. So in that sense, it's gonna be right here on the same channel, which is gonna be very, like, beneficial as far as, keeping everything organized and putting it on a playlist and just selecting that to be the podcast. Excited because it's going to be hitting both the video and the audio side in one shot. And for those of you who don't know, right now the RSS is not actually going to be linked up, but they are going to be linking it up on the back end. So I'm kind of labeling it right now podcasting 2.0, because we are going to see this new implementation of the way that you're able to consume podcasts. Basically a switch of a button going from audio to visual to keep you as immersed or as, you know, drawn away as you prefer the way that you want to listen to the podcast. So very interesting the way that things are rolling out now, and I'm excited for all those things to come out in the future. All right, so we're gonna get things rolling. This over here. Boom, perfect. All right. 5, 4. What's up, and welcome back to the Camera Junkie podcast. My name's Lewis. I'm also known as Mr. Camera Junkie, and today we have a very interesting topic that we're going to cover. Something that I'm calling the ultimate creator tool. And that is the new release or announcement of pre-release of the Sony ZV-E1 camera. Now, if you're familiar with Sony's labeling, conventions, you will know that they usually hold the number 1 in singularity for kind of like their flagship version of their cameras. Now, the only one that really doesn't apply to actually applies in the ZV line of or family of cameras, which is the ZV-1. Now, the ZV-1 is a 1-inch sensor fixed zoom lens camera that came out, I believe, in 2019, and a lot of people loved it for its convenience of lightweight, compact, and a lot of very interesting recording options, including even 950 frames a second for a 1-second burst to give you like extremely slow motion. All of this was jam-packed into this small body and labeled the content creator's camera. Well, the content creators really liked the camera but felt that it was missing one feature, which was the zoom range was basically from a 24 to 70, a conventional zoom range, but a lot of people felt that the 24 millimeter focal length equivalent wasn't wide enough for handheld vlogging, which is what they basically labeled that camera to be. Third-party companies actually ended up creating lenses that you would adapt onto these cameras to give you a little bit more width within your shot, and that actually ended up giving a lot of boost, and sales started increasing once you paired those two items together. But the one backdraw was that the extension of the zoom lens itself, holding on a heavier piece of glass, ended up making it prone to accidents. Now they ended up coming out with another version, which was basically a lot of the same elements that you would find in the previous ZV cameras, but they introduced the first one with an E-mount let me re-say that. It was the first one that was announced with an E-mount built into it. It was an APS-C sized camera, and it's called the ZV-E10. It has the same exact sensor that we've been dealing with in all of our previous APS-C cameras, which is the 24.4 megapixel, and it's the same one that you will find on the A6000, A61, 64, so on and so forth. But you now have that compact body with a lot of the latest features, including a fully articulating tilt-out touchscreen LCD with their new patented 3-capsule directional microphone with built-in windscreen, all in a convenient interchangeable lens package. It was an APS-C camera, but they also introduced this with a couple of interesting lenses, one of them being the 11mm f1.8, which is a small, lightweight APS-C designed lens that pairs very well with this camera, and giving you an equivalent of a 15 to 16 millimeter focal length in a very small package. That camera did very well in sales just last year. So now, with the naming convention going into play, there was rumors going around of a new ZV line camera that was going to be introduced by Sony, but with a full frame sensor. Now, there was some things that I had talked about in a previous live stream and or podcast, and the way that I was thinking was completely off base, and I will go over the things that I was totally wrong about, because I was thinking that if they were going to come out with an inexpensive ZV full frame camera, that they would revert back to their simple or their more commonly used 24 megapixel sensor that you can find going back all the way from the original Sony A7. So putting those parameters into play, I came out with what I thought might have been what Sony was going to be producing as far as their first full frame E-mount ZV camera. And boy, was I wrong. They came out swinging, and I'm going to go over some specs now, because this thing really does earn the one moniker in its name. And now the name of this new camera is the ZV-E1 E-mount, and one as being like their flagship type camera of the ZV line. It is, like I said, full frame E-mount camera, 12 megapixel full frame sensor. Now you might say that's a downgrade from what I had mentioned, the 24, but it actually is a much newer and better sensor. It's the same one that you would find on the Sony A7S III, the Sony FX3, and the Sony FX6, which is two of those well into their cinema line of cameras, meaning the same exact quality that you can get from those cameras, $6,000-$7,000 cameras, can now be found for $2,200 with all of the latest and greatest tech that even those cameras do not have in this new small lightweight package. Now, I'm gonna mention this as well because there's so many creators who actually talk about have talked about in the past that they will prefer a full frame sensor, that they don't care about the size, and that, you know, the convenience of the package really doesn't matter because they can't revert from full frame, which I understand. I've always been someone who prefers APS-C for video because you can get the same amount or very similar to quality out of these smaller kits, and they are a lot more convenient and lightweight. And now with this new ZV-E1, all of the same content creators who said that they would not give it up are absolutely going gagas over the lightweightness, so to speak, of this new camera that they get in their hands. And they're like, this is perfect for vlogging because it's so lightweight. And I'm like, yep, that's why I love my Sony APS-C cameras, because of that same exact feature. So now, the Sony ZV-E1 has what I am really surprised about, and I didn't think was going to be found in this line of cameras, is their 5-axis stabilization. Their 5-axis SteadyShot in-body image stabilization system is found in this new system, and it just leans way more towards those previous cameras that I mentioned, being the A7S III, the FX3, and the FX6. So it is leading way more towards the cinema side and the videography side within the Sony ZV family, which tends to be, or was meant to be, more of a budget-friendly system. And because it has that same system, this is probably one of the only cameras in the ZV family that I would say would be recommended also for photography. Why? Because that same system that you have with the IBIS and that 12 megapixel sensor, you also have a mechanical shutter. So this is the first ZV-1 camera that has a mechanical shutter alongside and not just being strictly electronic. And when it comes to photography, a mechanical shutter is night and day the difference. Now, it still does not have an EVF, which if it did, I think it would totally have killed off some of their other cameras, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But being part of this family, no EVF, a fully articulating 3-inch touchscreen LCD, but it has the latest touchscreen firmware that actually has features that have not been seen on any other cameras. The ones that I'm talking about in particular are the fact that you can change your shutter speed, your aperture, and all those different settings that weren't available from the touchscreen on the, on the opposite side of the lens. So that's a feature that's very that's very amazing. It's really cool. And knowing that all the future cameras and maybe some of the previous ones might be getting it through firmware updates, but I'm also going to talk about firmware updates a little bit later. This 12 megapixel sensor, because of its low megapixel count, actually has extremely fast readout. So it's gonna basically have or eliminate what we have, what we call rolling shutter. So you're not really gonna have a lot of issues with banding and images looking bad when you're panning or tilting the camera in your production. So minimal rolling shutter, which is one of the key features and really amazing about this sensor. But now going more into the body itself, you're gonna have one of the features that it lacks is that it only has one memory card slot. Now that totally fits into the economic ZV line, but really falls away from the other cameras that we've been mentioning before. Another thing that I do have to mention about this camera, and one of the it's very interesting because when you look up the specs of this camera, this is something that's actually listed, which is operating temperature. Now, most of the specs of the cameras that I go to research about, this is not a line that I come across, too often. I usually have some type of, limit for recording times if overheating is an issue with that particular camera body. But this one, that they kind of already had foreseen that they were going to have certain issues with overheating because of everything that you're asking this unit to do, including house the bigger NPF Z100 batteries, which is found on all of their flagship cameras and all of their full frame cameras, which really was another thing that I had wrong, because I was expecting that they were going to stick to the NPF 50s, because thinking that they were going to be using the older technology of those 24 megapixel sensors like in the Sony A7. That camera worked on that sensor with the smaller NPF 50 batteries. So that's where my mindset, but like I said, I was thinking way more budget of them using more budget items, but they totally knocked it out of the park, seeming that this really is leaning way more towards like a baby FX3, like a baby, like an FX 5.5 or something, you know what I'm saying? Like it's something like that. But it is very, very surprising the amount of technology that they put into it, including the like multi-interface hot shoe that they are famous for. Meaning this camera, even though it does have that patented 3-capsule microphone, it also has that, you know, connection through the hot shoe, allowing you to apply some of Sony's newer, you know, microphones that are powered directly through the camera, so that you don't have to worry about extra cables and things like that, freeing up the slots that might block your LCD. Because if you were to use an external microphone on this camera body, then at that moment you will have a door that's flapped open that will kind of hinder your articulation and view of the LCD. So that's something to note, because the connection for that is on that same exact side. So what connections do we have with this camera? Well, we have a USB-C, which allows you to connect directly to computers like the other ZV cameras, giving you the ability to use it directly without a video capture card, so that you can use it as your web camera. And this is the first one that they actually gave the ability to go into 1080 full high definition for live streaming. Is it 1080 or maybe even 4K? But I digress, because this camera is the first one to give us the operating temperature. The operating temperature of 32 degrees to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or from 0 to 40 Celsius, is very interesting to me, because they knew that they were restricted. You know, like the battery itself being bigger gives you more battery life, but then also increases the probability of overheating, because it's a bigger unit that's creating more heat while it's dissipating its energy. Now, this camera is very interesting because the shooting speeds that we're getting is 4K 60 with full readout of the LCD, meaning there's no crop, and that is what's causing these overheating measures. But the system is also said that it's going to reach, what is it, 120p, so 120 frames per second in 4K full readout with no crop, and also 240 frames a second slow motion in high definition in a firmware to come. This is where I also have to just take note. A term or a phrase that I've heard before, which I kind of live by, is don't buy anything with the promise of a firmware update. And the reason why I mentioned this is because if it's right now at 4K 60 and people are having overheating issues because, you know, this thing is just as small as it can be, it doesn't have really passive cooling because it doesn't have the space to fit it, and then you're asking it to do one of the highest processes in recording in 4K 60 and only one upped by the 4K 120. If you're having issues with the 4K 60, how fast or how little actual 4K 120 recording will you be able to get out of this camera, even if you do get it from a firmware update? I would say about 15 minutes. And that's where the question that lies is that has Sony really cannibalized their other cameras, their A7S3s, their FX3s, and their FX6s with the release of this camera? And my thoughts on that is no, not at all. Because there's a lot of people like myself that aren't in the market at all for an FX6, who aren't in the market at all for an FX3. And maybe because just how I am, I might have been looking into the A7S3 if I can get a good deal. But this camera is amazing for what it is and what it is for content creators. Now, there's some people who are going to argue that fact and be like, well, which content creators are you talking about? And the ones that I'm going to mention are the ones that were in direct contact with Sony. So now Sony as a company and a camera division for the last 3 or 4 years now have actually had creator camp, or Sony's creator camp. And you know, through the lockdowns and everything, they did host one last year, and they are hosting, or they just recently hosted one recently for the announcement of this new camera, the ZV-E1. And that's where you see that the insights that Sony got from these creators in the previous years have come to fruition in this new camera body. And those are all of the ones that we're talking about, that I would never give up my full frame for a smaller APS-C body, and they now have the best of both worlds. One of these creators that let me start that over again. One of the creators that uses the Sony brand is Peter Lindgren. He's been featured on Cities Got Here before, and he actually sold his Sony a7S III because of the convenience of this new ZV-E1. And he says this is the perfect camera for him, and I kind of agree. Because even though he loved the quality that he was getting from his Sony a7S III, he was one who actually recognized the convenience of having a lightweight system to document more or less when it comes to vlogging. Now, when you have the time, the setup, the crew, the gear, right, to do a music video where you're setting up lights and everything like that, I can see that this isn't the camera that this same creator, Peter Lindgren, is going to go for. He's got various options, and that's why he still owns his FX3 and his DJI Ronin 4D. These are more of his cinema-based cameras that he would use for those aspects. But Peter also has a vlog channel. And on that vlog channel, he was one of the ones who used the before mentioned ZV-1 with an adapted lens to make it a little bit wider, so on and so forth. And he loved it for the convenience of its small package and being able to basically fit it in a pouch and carry it with him wherever he went. He's also one of the creators who ended up breaking, I think, 2 of those, extracted lens cameras while utilizing it, breaking it. He dropped it over here, it fell over there, so he was one of the ones that would see the benefits of the full frame, but also just couldn't shy away from the convenience of a smaller package that was giving him such good quality. And this was the first ZV-1 camera that I had mentioned. And now for him, this is the best of both worlds. He's able to put his high quality, like 16 to 35 millimeter lens, which he loves, giving him wide and some zoom for his vlogging in a small enough package where he feels that he can take that anywhere he goes, and at a price point for him where he doesn't feel like breaking a $6,000 camera for a vlog is gonna be viable. So for him, this is his ideal camera. And I say that it's the ideal camera for a lot of people who are maybe in a similar place to him. Now, for me, this camera really does entice me because it is a full frame version of the cameras that it's a different version and a less expensive version of the camera that I am interested in, being the A7S III, as you know, a video centric camera. But I'm a EVF guy, so I need the electronic viewfinder. And one of the things that I would love about the A7S III is the fact that it has that 9.4 million dot viewfinder that looks like an IMAX screen on your iris, and it is amazing. And if you've looked through that, you know what I'm talking about. So those are certain features that is an expensive addition to any camera body, and I know that Sony is saving by not adding it to this and a variety of different cameras like the FX3, so on and so forth. So why is this song, I'm just saying off of rip, why is this song just tends to be a little bit louder than the rest? I'm gonna just see if we can mosey along that. Okay, we'll continue. So now, going back to it, I'm big on the EVF, so that's why the non-EVF cameras are not always what I am the most attracted to, but this camera has so many amazing features that it kind of leaves you scratching your head. And I know that it's leaving a lot of people who have invested in Sony's camera systems and all of those other cameras also scratching their head, because this thing is punching way above its weight. It has these new features of intelligent tracking. That's all I can basically say, and they call it AI tracking, but it's intelligent tracking, where it also does framing. And these are just iterations of algorithms that Sony has been working on for so many years, but now are being implemented into the video side of it, because they were basically, delegated to the photography side. The example that I can give is image reframing. This is something that we are seeing now in this new iteration of Sony ZV-E1. What it does is that you can take a wide angle shot and you can select what section or what, like rule of thirds, or what part of the frame you want to majorly stay in. And then as you walk away, it will continuously zoom in and track you as if you were almost like on a gimbal, because it now has the ability of doing this however many times per second, giving your video autofocus the ability to, or giving you the ability to have motion within your shot and within your frame, as if you were to have a cameraman with you, but all done through the AI software built into this camera. So why do I mention this? Is because that same terminology has been used in Sony photography way back, as far as I think the camera that I've seen it is the Sony NEX6, which is from like 2012, which had the feature called image reframing. So it will take a photograph and it will also then intelligently select the best portion of that frame and cut it out through a crop. And what you would get in your SD card was two files, which was the RAW, which was the original file, and then a JPEG of the zoomed in cropped version, which was, addressing, rule of thirds or a bunch of different features, making photography easier for the novice. And now that was an auto focus feature that was, like I said, way back 2013, that was only available then in one single frame for one single shot. But if you understand video or videography a little bit, you also understand that when we say 24 frames a second, 30 frames a second, that's how many physical shots are being taken in the frame, in the time frame of a second per second on the length of the video that represent the moving motion of what you're capturing. And because you had so many frames prior that you were doing 24, 30, 60 frames per second, you were limited on what you could or could not do as far as autofocusing went. Now, with this new camera, the technology has reached a point where you can add that image reframing to every single frame of your recorded content. So now if you have 24 shots in a second, 30 shots, you can now add that image reframing through this new intelligent autofocus, AI autofocus, however you want to call it. And now it gives you the ability to be tracked without the camera moving at all. And that has a lot of benefits, because if someone were to be moving, you do have another failure point, which is, you know, shakes and little things that need to be removed, whether through IBIS or through post. But now you have a camera on a tripod that is moving around as if somebody were there tracking you. It's like a floating gimbal. So these new features that are implemented into this camera is why I know that it's punching well above its weight. And it is interesting to see who will not end up buying this camera, because even if you were to own any of the before mentioned cameras in the Sony system, this is like the perfect companion or B camera to all of those. And I'm gonna go back to what I said. It doesn't cannibalize the Sony system in my eyes for this reason. I think it's only gonna enhance the amount of sales of the other cinema cameras in the future for Sony, because they're giving you so much power. And what it's going to do is that it's going to get you 100% into the Sony ecosystem, and they are catching up, if not leading the way, with the most extensive lens lineup available. And they're revamping all of their before, you know, their first versions of their G Master lenses. They're now coming out with the G Master 2s, which are just amazingly ridiculous lenses. Now, that's the one thing that you have to keep in mind here. Full frame lenses are vastly more expensive than their APS-C counterparts. But if this fits within your budget, this, in my opinion, hands down, is a no-brainer, must pre-order if you can. Get your hands on one as soon as possible type of technology that will change everyone's ability to create content. I am literally just scratching the surface, because there's so many things that this camera is capable of doing. And I can tell you from the research and the videos that I've seen myself, I would highly advise you to go check out Farouk's video on this camera from iPhonedo YouTube video channel. Also somebody else who was featured on Cities Gaw. And go check out his video on top of amazing B-roll, that just amazing B-roll footage. What the paces that he put the camera through and the use case scenarios that he put in his video, I feel were probably one of the best videos that were released on this topic of the Sony ZV-E1. So I highly recommend you check out his video if you want to know a little bit more about all of those nuances that this camera is now capable of doing through the firmware and the AI algorithm technology that's built into it. So I highly recommend that. And as we talk about Cities GAW, we're going to get right back into it, because this week's Cities GAW, this is the one. Cities GAW, this week's Cities GAW. Look, you know what? Let's do that all over again. We'll go from the main shot. We'll rewind it. And speaking of Cities GAW, channels that I think you should go and watch. Hey, somebody bought me a coffee. That's cool. I just set that up. So, Law, dude, highly appreciated, man. That worked. Thank you. You know, I was going to mention it a little bit later that if you do want to support, you can buy me a coffee. And that is actually now working. So it comes up on the screen as you saw before. That was super cool. Excited that worked. That hasn't been working for a long time, so I haven't really been mentioning it. So now that I got that working, super cool, and highly appreciate the support, sir. But let me finish that off again, because this will be cut out of the podcast section. Okay, that's why we edit, people. That's why we edit. All right. And talking about Cities GAW, this week's Cities GAW, channels that I think you should go and watch, is none other than my good friend, Diana Gladney. Now, Diana Gladney is also a Sony shooter. As you can see here, we have videos of Sony ZV-E1, if you think it's too much, specs, so on and so forth. But some of her previous videos happen to be one of her more recent achievements. And I'm very proud to say that she has released a new book called The One Right Video, which I happen to have right here. So I'm going to look up my notes again, and I'm going to drop this in here. Drop that in there in the chat. So if anyone wants to check out that video, boom, there we go. That should have worked. Right, and yes, Miss Diana Gladney, she has a lot of great content. She also just reached another milestone of surpassing 20,000 subscribers. So once again, big up to you, Ms. D. And as you can see, she's an amazing content creator. She's got a lot of amazing content, and telling you, from being able to meet with her one-on-one and like pick her brain for a little bit about the information that she has, it's next level stuff. So I highly recommend you check out her channel if you have not already. Is Diana Gladney on YouTube, Ms. D, and her new book, go out and pick it up, The One Right Video. Oh, someone else got me a coffee. It doesn't say who it is, but man, highly appreciated. Man, that's so cool. That's actually working now. And Miss D, yes, Miss Diana Gladney, go check out her channel if you haven't done so already. I highly recommend. You can learn so much from this individual. She is an amazing content creator, live speaker, just all around educator. And I am very honored to call her my friend. So if you haven't done so already, go ahead and check out Ms. D. And that's this week's Cities GAW, channels that I think you should go and watch. All right. And there we have it. And now we're going, let me close it off. All right, and that's it for this week's version of All right, and that's it for this week's episode of the Camera Junkie podcast. Thank you as always for hanging out here with me, and be sure to subscribe. And if you have any questions at all, send them out to me. I'll be happy to answer them live and in the podcast. My name's Lewis, also known as Mr. Camera Junkie. Until next time, talk to you. And for those of you who are here, I think I'm going to start using that as more of an outro, that talk to you, because that's actually how I talk. For those of you who have gotten me on the cell phone, when I hang up with somebody, that's kind of like my send off. Usually it's always like, all right, talk to you. Instead of saying like talk to you later, I just end up saying the talk to you and then clicking. So I think I'm going to start using it. It just flowed. So I think I'm going to try to implement that more. But with that being said, let's get back into the chat to the Camera Junkie crew. And dude, you guys are amazing. The support through the Buy Me a Coffee, that's so cool. I can't take the smile off my face, because that is just like amazing, that not only that it works, but that you guys are the Camera Junkie crew. You guys are so cool to send the love in that manner. I highly appreciate it. All right, we got the switching cameras going. Let's get into the chat here. Let's do this. All right, first let's see. Let me just scroll down here to where I was. Okay, the first question I see is from Randall. It says, how is the podcast viewership going? I'm wondering if you need a video for video for the podcast. Well, I haven't actually started it at all, Randy. What it is, to clarify, is that now I was wondering, like, how was I gonna do it, if I was gonna go through Captivate and things like that. I still think that I might end up doing that in the future, but to start things off, I'm going from scratch as a YouTuber. So as a YouTuber, I'm going to give the YouTuber aspect of podcasting, which is my view of what Google is actually doing, or YouTube is actually doing now with podcasting. I believe is the new wave. So there's podcasts that I listen to, people that I've mentioned here before, Bandrew Scott from the Bandrew Says podcast, from Podcastage, Tom Buck. There's quite a few people who are always talking about the fact that this new form of YouTube podcasting isn't podcasting because it doesn't work with RSS feeds. And that is a very old and antiquated system. So you're trying to make a video platform conform to a audio only, very generic, simple way of communication, which RSS stands for really simple syndication. It's in the name, right? So the people who are complaining are the ones who've been using podcasting RSS, understand that it's simple, and want to keep it that way. And no, don't change anything because I'm good at this, which a lot of other people find very confusing, but because I'm good at it, I want to keep it this way. Well, technology and everything, the world moves on. And because video podcasting has become very prevalent in today's day and age, the fact that people understand what a podcast is, because not too long ago, if you were to mention to someone, oh, I make podcasts, or I'm a podcaster, what you would actually get is people being like, what is that? What? And they were like, oh, so it's like radio, but without commercials? So like they wouldn't really understand the concept. And now you can mention podcasts and it's a term, a phrase that is commonplace. You know, like people, whether they don't know all the nuances, kind of get the gist of it. And that has all changed because of the video podcasting. Not because of podcasting itself, but because a lot of the bigger podcasts have also moved into the video realm. Oh man. I just realized that Aiden got into a batch of iPhones that I was working on before, and he got them all over the place. So I got cleaning to do once I'm done here, but I digress. So going back to it, that the video podcasting in the space is what's actually propelled podcasting itself. And you know how we always say the rising tide raises all ships together, and that's more or less what has happened through video podcasting. And the RSS feeds, the old style of doing it, actually are having trouble trying to catch up with providing the video aspect to the same audio source, because they're stuck on the really simple syndications. They're stuck on the antiquated systems. So now YouTube said, you know what? Let's not try to like reinvent that wheel, and let's do it how we would do it and do it how we do best. And now you can take your video podcast, so the sections that I've cut out and that I record within the live streams, and you saw me edit in a podcast or in a live stream a couple of weeks ago where I was showing you the steps and me editing the first episode of the Camera Junkie podcast in video form. I was thinking that now I'm gonna have to, like, once I'm done with it, I'm gonna have to strip the audio, upload that separately into an older type of system, the older RSS, and then from there go and then re-upload the video. And that's where I was still kind of undecided if I was gonna start a completely separate channel to see how it worked with YouTube video, right, and YouTube video podcasting, so that it wouldn't really clash with what I do within my channel, and how that was going to be rolled out so that I can also have the video aspect of podcasting. Well, the way that YouTube rolled it out is that you just put the videos up on your channel, so they're basically going to perform the way any other video. So you have the ability, right, or the opportunity for that video to go viral if it so happens to be a viral podcast video that you created, right? All that potential of, you know, of every video that you upload, it's still there. But then on the back end, you're able to take all of your podcast created videos and put them in a separate playlist, which is beneficial for you on a variety of different reasons. One of them being that if somebody were to find your podcast, they could easily be introduced the entire playlist as a thumbnail on their YouTube feed at the end of a video. I know you guys have seen this, just like I have, that you would watch a video, and as soon as you're done, you're presented with the same video thumbnail that you just watched, and you're like, I just watched this, but then it says mix, and it's got like a number next to it registering like how many videos are on that playlist. That's exactly one of the methods of how your video can now be presented to potential viewers / listeners through YouTube itself. But then you're going to take it that next step further. There are iPhones everywhere. Okay. Focus, Lewis. Focus. So now you can take it one step further by taking that playlist and setting that playlist as a podcast. So you're now taking your podcast content that you've created in video form. You're not extracting audio. You're not doing any extra steps. You're just creating the video. And let's say your live stream is your podcast and you're not going to do any editing at all. So let's say I decided I can take right now the entire list of my Camera Junkie live stream, put it on a playlist, set that as a podcast, even though it's not really edited that way. And now you will have the audio version on YouTube Music available for listeners, and through the YouTube integrated player, the ability to click a button, or like a switch, and go from the video version to the audio only version, just like flick of a switch. And that's all integrated within the player, and that's like the future, the podcasting 2.0 that I see, where now you're able to create a video podcast and it will be distributed both in audio and video form, chosen by the viewer, the listener. And with that being said, because they decided, hey, you know what, we're going to do it our way, they still have the ability to kind of retroactively add the RSS because it's an antiquated system, and that's what they're working on right now. So eventually, the same way that you would upload a podcast to Podbean, to all the different podcatchers or the sources to load into it, the systems that they're using, the RSS, will eventually be caught up through this same system. So the only thing that you have to do is, like mentioned before, create the video, put it in a playlist, label it as a podcast, and you're good to go. So that answered a lot of my questions as far as what I was going to do, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm just gonna repurpose the content from the live stream, upload it as its own video, and then host it in a live stream, in a playlist that's called Camera Junkie Podcast, label it as a podcast, and we'll see where that goes from there. But that's the future of the Camera Junkie Podcast as far as right now, and we'll see how YouTube implements that from here on out. Man, that got lengthy, but hopefully that explained both the scenario and how I'm gonna use it. Roy's over here saying this camera makes me sick. It's so cool, dude. All the features in it, the way that it tracks people now, even if they're turned around, that was one of the new AI features found in the latest, the before, how would you say that, but their previous camera release, which is the Sony A7R5, has all of these types of implementations because it has that new AI chip in it. And man, this thing is really, it's next level stuff. But once again, I say check out iPhone Doe's video on it, because I think he did the best job on showing you all the little quirks and features that the camera has and what it can do. Like, you can tell it to record with, a clean HDMI out to your computer, and then one with all of the information to an external recorder simultaneously, and flip information on what's going into a memory card. Next level stuff, man. Next level stuff. Hey, Kathy's in the house saying, hey, peeps. She also has a question saying, I have the ZV-1 and the E10, and they're worth selling to get this new one. Kathy, in my opinion, for you, no. I think the ZV-E10 is a much or equivalent type camera for any of your needs. And if you want to sell the ZV-1, if you're not using it, maybe, but not to buy this camera, because on top of purchasing this camera, you do have to put into account that you cannot really use any APS-C lenses on it. And if you were to buy this camera for APS-C lenses, I would tell you to buy the ZV-E10, because it also has a lot of these features. And maybe, like I said, we don't really count on firmware updates. I would never buy a camera saying, oh, because it's supposed to have an update coming in the future. If it's not part of the camera when you buy it, kind of just take any additional add-ons through firmware updates as a cherry on top, as a bonus feature, something to stay amazed at, because there are far and few companies that are really going to give you all the bells and whistles through a firmware update. I think Fuji's only one of the ones who actually do things like that, but when they do, it takes a long time. It takes 2 years or maybe even longer for them to create anything substantial with a firmware update. And the fact that this is the latest and greatest technology, I wouldn't be surprised if it takes roughly that same amount of time for other cameras through the Sony family to start receiving these types of updates, if the components inside of them can handle it. But on top of it being $2,200, you're gonna be spending, even in third-party lenses, to get like a 20 to 40 Sigma lens, you're gonna be spending another $700-800 on top of it. So you're looking at a $3,000 investment, and that's kind of entry level for this camera. So you would have to know, unless you already own full frame glass and saying like, you know what, I was saving up for that $5,000 FX3 or that, you know, $4,000 A7S III, whatever it is that you were saving up for or budgeting for, this one might meet you at the middle and have a lot of features that you weren't even going to get in those other camera bodies. And you can get that right now without hopes of getting the other camera bodies, in hopes that they might get a firmware update in the future to make it do what this camera does at a lesser price. And that's why it's really a head scratcher, but it really goes to show you that Sony is listening to the creators, especially the ones that go to their creator camp, and putting their best foot forward, even if it is in one of their entry-level line of cameras. So that's my opinion for you, Kathy. You shouldn't buy this camera just to have it. You can get all of the features, including 4K 30, high quality, so on and so forth, with the ZV-E10. And the lenses that you could apply to it are a lot less expensive, and you can get really high quality glass. And how I always say, glass before ass, because the camera lenses are way more important than the camera bodies. He says only hoarders are here, display monthly. Yeah, that's the whole thing. I always think about that, Randy. Like, I budget for my cameras, so if I can't buy it outright, you know, then I haven't budgeted correctly for the camera in my eye. So that's the way that I see it. Okay, what am I hearing? I'm hearing a sound, right? And I can't figure out exactly where it's coming from, but that's totally on the production side. What is that sound? And it sounds familiar, but I can't put my finger on it. I digress. All right. The ZV-E1 is like the A7C in size, but having the megapixels or rangefinders. Let me read that again. The ZV-E1 is like the A7C size, but not having the megapixels or rangefinder EVF. Yeah. Yeah, saw Peter's video is very convincing. Yeah, but if you would have seen his other videos when he breaks the ZV-1 multiple times, then you would know. It'd be like, oh yeah, like this is perfect for him. But he even broke his 16 to 35 lens. If you saw the video that Peter did with Peter McKinnon when they were in Italy, I believe, or something like that. So I found that funny that he meets Peter McKinnon for the first time, gets to hang out with him, gets an interview with Peter McKinnon while hanging out, and he busted his camera and it's completely out of focus. So it goes to show you that, you know, the content is king overall, because even someone who is a professional who knows what he's doing could have gear fail on them. And yet, I don't know about you, but I saw that video with the broken autofocus, and I remember listening to the conversation and enjoying the video just the same, or maybe even a little bit more, knowing that, hey, it happens to all of us. It happens to the best of us. All right, Travis Varga Films, welcome to the Camera Junkie live stream. I believe this is the first time you partake here, so welcome. He says the A7S III still king, like in his book. And yep, because he said EVF all day. I kind of agree with you, man. Like I said, yeah, like IMAX said, it's like enter then real life, right? It is, man, and it's so better. It's saying, yeah, it kind of is. It's like you're what's in front of you in extremely high definition, crisp as can be. That viewfinder is next level stuff, man. Next level stuff. Oh, Law is asking me, am I picking one up? As of right now, no. I might be if things change, but this is the whole thing. As of right now, I'm not in the need of that camera. It's totally 100% in the want category. Like, I want a new camera. I'm getting the Camera Junkie itch, right? Because I did get the new ZV-E1F, but that's more of a proof of concept for a couple of different things that I'm doing with it. It's a what I call a GE camera, right? A good enough camera because it's good enough for a lot of things. Like I'm really surprised at the B-roll that I get from this camera because of the active stabilization. That's the same one that you're gonna find. So, you know, the electronic active stabilization, the algorithm that is that technology is the same in that little $500 camera than the $2,200 camera that we're talking about right now, or the like what is it? I think it's like $4,000 camera in the A7R5, right? Like all of that technology, the active stabilization from the biggest to the smallest camera in Sony's line is exactly the same, and because it's in there, it works very, very well. And you put it in the S&Q, which is the slow and quick and the slow motion, or just record in the 120 frames. Man, this little thing packs a punch, and for $500, well worth it. But that's why I'm not sure if I'm gonna be picking this up. I will know a little bit later, because there's also other rumored cameras. What? Other rumors? Absolutely. Other rumored cameras that are still going to be unveiled this year, and one of them being a one monikered type, basically flagship APS-C camera. And now, if you go into the FX30, right? And the FX30 is a little brother to the Sony FX3. The FX30 is basically an FX3, but with an APS-C sensor. But here's the twist. Sony, since like 2014, I think 2014 with the A6000, they've been using a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor. And the Sony FX30 is the first APS-C camera to come out outside of the A6000 family, right? Because we have the A6000, the 61, the 63, the 64, the 65, the 66. We've had all of those, 6600, just to be clear, all of those are 100. So it's 6100, 62, 6300, 6400, 6600, even 65. All of those have the same exact sensor, but this new FX30 has a new 26.4 megapixel sensor. And for those of you who've hung out in the Camera Junkie live stream before, you would also know that Sony is the #1 provider of camera sensors to a lot of other camera brands that people love, including Fuji and Nikon, right? And Fuji, in their FX, is it the XT4, has a 26 megapixel sensor, which people rant and rave about, and I believe is the same one that you would find on the FX30. And now Sony is implementing their own version of their sensors that they've sold to other companies, but once they work all the kinks out of it, that's when they'll start utilizing the technology for themselves and bring it out to its highest capacity, and that's why you're getting such amazing images from what we used to deal with in a 7 or 6K downsample. It now is like 7.2K with this new 26.6 megapixel sensor found in the FX30, and I believe that that same sensor is going to make its way into a new flagship APS-C camera with a nice and crispy EVF, a nice crispy electronic viewfinder. And I am a team flip up type of guy. I love the flip up screens. That's why I use my A6100s. But I would not be adverse, you know, over the flip out screens. I love the flip up screens, but I would not be adverse to something similar that we found on the Sony A7R5 that has that new two-way articulation screen that gives you fully articulating to the front screen, but still gives you that traditional, you know, front to back for photography with a viewfinder. Is like, Sony, take my money. So that's where I'm keeping my hopes up, and because I don't have a real need or hole in my system right now, I don't have to like jump at any of the new cameras when they come out. That's why I didn't jump on the ZV-E10. That's why I didn't jump on a lot of these, and that's why I picked up the Sony ZV-1F, because it is their new fixed sensor, you know, 20 millimeter focal length, wide vlogging, cheap camera, because I want to demonstrate that you can get high quality with even what some people will consider to be junk. It's almost part of my name, right? Like Mr. Camera Junkie, you might consider this camera junk, but I can show you that if you were to upgrade your skills, then you can use a phone, you can use a ZV-1F and just about any camera within the last 5 to 8 years and make amazing content. That should not be an excuse. It shouldn't be your crutch. I strongly and firmly feel that way and believe in that. That's why I do what I do. Boom. Wow, we are way past the hour. Let's see about these questions here. G. Albert has a question, says, Lewis, out church has 2 of the same Sony cameras that we use for worship services. I noticed that lighting on the live stream from one camera is darker than the other. Any advice for me, really, to relate? So let me read this. It says has 2 of the same Sony cameras. Okay, if you're dealing with lighting, you would need to check that their settings are all the same, right? So their ISOs should be matching, because if one of them has an ISO that's fixed at a low sensitivity, you know, like at ISO 100, 200, and the other one is on auto ISO, that one is going to raise the gain to make the image look brighter, and that would be the difference right off the bat. The other thing that you have to also take into play is what lenses are you using, because if I have like this front camera or this one right here, this is a f2.8, right? So it's an f2.8 lens that you're seeing right now. This is my iPhone, but my main camera, right? Let's go back to it. This main camera is a f1.4, so I can get really like a bright image even in a dark environment, which would make all the difference in the world in the quality of the image and the light output that you would be getting from it on the other end. If I were to take this other camera here, my B camera, and then put the kit lens on it, and the kit lens is only able to open up to aperture f4.0, automatically having my front camera at f1.4 and having my secondary camera at 4.0 with the same amount of lighting, that one, the secondary f4.0, is gonna look darker. And if I were to use the ISO to like, boost up the image, that's where you're gonna add more noise and more grain, and then that's when your first image is gonna look bright and crispy clear, and then this one's gonna look bright but muddy with a lot of haze and stuff, because you're using the sensor to bring up that sensitivity. So that's the difference, and that's the information that I can relay to you. You will need to check out your ISOs that they're matching. If the one that's brighter is good enough, and that's the only difference, that I would tell you to match the brightness on the ISO on the one that's darker. And then at the same time, if they are the same, then you need to check the lenses to make sure that you're giving them the same amount of light in to try to match the images. And this is the moderator, saying if you do want to help Mr. Camera Junkie, which is myself, please do so by supporting me through Buy Me a Coffee, which some of you have done already, and I am humbled and amazed, because it's just I still stay shocked that I'm able to do this and get such amazing support from such amazing people like all of you. This Camera Junkie crew is what makes this so special every week. All right, this is the link for Ms. D's video. Robert said, nice outro. Thank you. You see, like, I'm going to be putting those together, and when I edit them more, I'm going to be like, ooh, I like that one as an outro. Ooh, I like this, or, I pretty much got my intro for the live stream here down packed, and it varies a little bit, but I kind of got that smoothed out, and now it just comes out automatically, because it's just, hey, what's up, everyone? And that's practice. Hopefully, right after 122 episodes, I would get some type of consistency. Mulain's in the house saying, hey there, Mr. Camera Junkie. How are you doing? All right, Marine X says, I use my FX3 on my most recent vlog, and I just realized how much pre-roll I record sometimes. The other day, I filmed 23 minutes in direct sunlight, 4K at 120. I wonder if this camera will handle that. I can tell you right off the bat, no way at all would this new camera handle that. Like, I would say 23 minutes maybe, but I'm really thinking, if you're getting 40 minutes before overheating in some cases, because it doesn't have a fan, that's the whole thing. The FX3, the FX30, they have a built-in fan that's designed to dissipate all of the heat from that sensor all the time, continuously on, just so that you can get those prolonged recording lengths. And that's how they know that, because they did not add a fan to this new camera, that they were going to be dealing with overheating. Hence why you even have a section that says operating temperatures within the specs sheet of this camera. But at 120 4K, I would say you're probably going to be getting around 15 to 20 minutes. And that's just roughly off the top of my head, saying that if you're getting 42 minutes at 60, double that up at 120, and then add a little bit more heat, you're looking at about 20 minutes max. Unless you got some new, which what I was just about to say and what I'm going to share with you guys right now makes absolute no sense, because like it was just like a random thought of me saying, like, unless you're going to get into some like water cooled system like you would find in a PC, right, where you putting like a metal block to the back of it and then go, yeah, at that point you're not saving anything. You're not saving money by buying this camera at $2,200. And if you're adding anything to it to try to make it last more, then go buy the FX30 or buy the FX3, something that can handle the heat, because there'll be no point. The convenience factor is 100% lost as soon as you're adding anything to cool it off or to maintain its power, like to maintain it running. So that's the way that I feel. At that point, go APS-C or get the FX30 with the fan, FX3, and you'll be good to go. I like this one. Robert says my wallet is allergic to full frame cameras and gear. I feel you, man. Except vintage glass, which I adapt for Micro Four Thirds sensors. Exactly. I also adapt full frame vintage glass. Absolutely love it. Here's a great example. Right off rip. This is on my Sony mount. Let's see if we can see it. Is it going to focus on it? All right, there we go. Some of you might recognize this lens. This is my Helios 44 M4 58mm f2 vintage lens. Oh, we're still on this camera. Oh, so my phone is also doing face tracking. Very interesting. So as soon as I cover my face, it'll focus on it. So that's my Helios vintage lens. Very lucky because this lens goes for like about $150 I've seen the most, right? And I found it for $60 and I was like buying it, and I found it with a camera body attached to it. So it was like a camera body, which I have on my rack up here, which is that little guy right there, which is my Zenit XP, an old Russian like military type of film camera, which is exactly where you would find these paired with. And I was very lucky to find one here in Miami, and I picked it up for $60. And I have both the vintage camera with the vintage lens. Hashtag winning. And yeah, use that, put it on there. And for the camera junkies, I got a new camera. I got a new toy. But it's a vintage camera just the same. That's why it's not anything that is like, hey, you can go out and pick it up, because they're kind of hard to find right now. You can't find them on the used market, but I'm just gonna leave that there as a total teaser, because I want to get a couple of mounts, get it up and running, and add some of these vintage lenses like this to the mix and put it on there to see what we can get out of it, or what I'm gonna get out of it. I'm gonna have a lot of fun with that. Oh, Kathy says, thank you, the stream just saved me 3K. Absolutely, it's not necessary. And trust me, like, my biggest thing is like, you always, when you see the new camera come out, like, here's the great example. And I was talking to Paul earlier today about car examples that I give. I always relate this a lot to cars, right? We all drive cars, and you could have bought a car last year or maybe even 5 years ago, and they announced the latest, greatest version of your same car. You don't feel the need to have to go and get like, oh my God, now they have like air-conditioned seats. I have to get it. I'm like, do you really need air-conditioned seats? Right? Or do you need heated seats? Right? Because I live in Miami. Like, people are like, oh, they have heated seats. I'm like, why? We have the sun. I'm trying to cool off all my seats, and you're trying to heat them. I digress. We're thinking two totally different things. But with that being said, you have to see what's your needs. And if there's a place within your production, and I'm speaking to everyone, if there's a part of your production where you're saying like, I wish this could be better, then that's when I would say look at the market, see what's available to satisfy that need. Because even if this new camera can do it, there's probably a camera that came out 2 years ago that totally handles everything in your workflow, and that also can save you hundreds, if not thousands of dollars, because you don't need the latest and greatest. Now, if you are a solo content creator, you don't have the ability to have an extra cameraman, and you have the capital to do this, then I would say more power to you. This is going to help you out as a solo individual content creator, so that you don't have to ask anyone else to actually like, hey, can you hold the camera for me? Can you shoot this for me? Right? Totally takes that out of the mix. But if what you're doing with your production doesn't need it, it doesn't need it. So that's just it. You have to base your needs on your own production and your production's needs. And reverse engineer from there. That's the best advice I can give you. That's that. Hey, Jim is in the house. You made it, saying hello, Lewis and Camera Junkies. Happy Saturday night. Happy Saturday night indeed. Hi guys, missed most of tonight. Sorry. Planning to catch up tomorrow. Hey man, I'm glad that you made it. Appreciate it. And I don't know when this comment came in, you know, if I can get the time off of it, but I think I spoke, I'm a half an hour deep past the hour, so you probably got a good amount of this broadcast anyways. And G Albert is saying, Lewis, thanks for the hints. I'll pass the comments on to the camera team. I really appreciate the humble address to a novice like me. Hey, I'm here to help, but those are the two things, and I'm gonna address them again. Check that the ISOs are exactly the same and that they're matching. You're going to want the ISOs to be at their lowest point possible, because their lowest point is going to give you the crispiest, cleanest image. But if it does get dark, you can bump that up to expose the image correctly. And if that's not the issue, then you need to also make sure that the lenses match as far as the apertures, because if you're trying to match the images, if you have a really expensive lens but then, you know, two kit lenses, if you're trying to match the images, you'll be better off using the two kit lenses on both cameras, so you're getting the best or the same exact output from each camera, so that there's no difference within the imagery, you know. And even if they're at a lower aperture setting, you can then boost them up to match their ISOs to expose the image correctly. And I think that would still be more beneficial than trying to get something that looks super amazing and then let the other one really like kind of fall behind, right? Fall by the wayside. But with that being said, we are 30 minutes past the hour. As always, this usually tends to go long because I'm Puerto Rican and you guys are amazing, and this is so much fun for me. It's the best part of my every week that I mention to you guys on a regular basis, and I would not be here if it wasn't for every single one of you and your amazing smiling faces, as I could just imagine they are. Everyone, I want to wish you a great and amazing week. I want you to take care of yourselves and each other, and know that if you haven't realized by now, we do this every single week, and this is week 122, and next week, same exact time, same exact place, we're going to be doing it all over again for episode 123 of the Camera Junkie live stream. I invite you to take the time, put it on your calendar, because we never miss a beat. Sometimes I'm late because of little Mr. Aiden, but besides that, I will always be here to hang out with the Camera Junkie crew. And as always, thank you for taking the time hanging out here with me. I wish you the best, and I will see you and all your smiling faces right here next week on the Camera Junkie live stream. Till then, talk to you.